None of us can improve alone. These software delivery performance metrics essentially have become industry standard.
Continuous improvement work is more important than daily work.
Are you using AI in your daily work? We may as well have asked, are you using a computer in your daily work? The reliability of your application is its number one feature. Ship smaller changes. That's kind of the path to better software delivery performance. The leader's job is really to sort of set the mission, set the goal, drive alignment across all of those teams to make sure that we're all working towards the same goal. Research that sits on a shelf is kind of meaningless. It's not super important. It doesn't really add any value. It's practitioners like yourself that take this research and put it into practice. That's what brings real value.
All right. Well, welcome to Digital Frontlines. We're excited to have Mr. Nathen Harvey from Google. Nathen is our guest today, developer relations engineer. Kind of unique, right? Not, I think for a lot of folks might not know that Google has these roles, and Nathan's really, the driving force behind DORA research, the DORA research program at Google Cloud, right? So for folks that are listening today, DORA is DevOps Research Assessment. So his team has been, hosting this kind of accelerate state of DevOps, and it's been the industry benchmark for the better part of 10 years now, Nathen?
Yeah, the DORA research program started over a decade ago now. Absolutely. Yeah.
That's amazing. I'm really excited to have you on the show. Thanks for joining, and I'll turn it over to you to kind of tell a little bit more about, your background and what you've been doing on the DORA project. You Chef, so you for those you don't know, Chef's an infrastructure automation company and community, and you were the community developer, co-edited the O'Reilly's bestseller 97 Things Every Cloud Engineer Should Know. So Nathen, welcome to Digital Frontlines.
Hey Heath, thanks so much for having me. It's really good to be here, and it's great to see you again. We run into each other ever so occasionally, and I wish it were more frequent, but here we are. The beauty of digital connections is we can record something like this and see each other today. So yeah, I am at Google Cloud. I've been there almost 7 years now, leading up DORA, which is, as you mentioned, a research program. Now, one thing I will say about DORA really quickly is that DORA used to stand for DevOps Research and Assessment. We've been on a mission to kind of de-acronym DORA. It's not an acronym for anything. It's just DORA. And this primary reason behind this is that sometimes when we go out and we ask people to participate in our surveys or read our reports, not everyone identifies with that word DevOps, right? Especially in today's day and age where platform engineering is getting a lot of traction. AI is really coming into the picture. Some people see the information that we have and say, DevOps, that's not me. So I'm going to pass on looking into that or participating in their survey or what have you. The reality is that DORA is and has always been focused on technology-driven teams and organizations. And how do we help those technology-driven teams and organizations improve? In fact, our tagline is get better at getting better. So we really want to help these teams adopt a mindset and a practice of continuous improvement. And frankly, that means that our survey and our findings and our research are valid and insightful for just about any role across the teams that are responsible for building, delivering, operating any type of technology. That includes, of course, leaders, all the way down to practitioners, and practitioners in so many different roles, whether it's product management, software engineering, release engineering, SRE, the whole gamut. Like, we want insights from everyone, and those insights really help us get the best understanding of what's happening today. Chef Software, before I joined Google Cloud, and there I had the privilege of running a lot of our community work there that we did. That included helping contributors contribute more to the open source projects, but also helping teams in organizations, again, of every shape and size, kind of take on infrastructure as code and leverage the benefits of that automation. That mission really to help teams improve continues on in my work with DORA. I should say that I didn't start DORA. DORA, it was actually an independent company for a while. That company was founded by Dr. Nicole Forsgren, Jez Humble, and Gene Kim. Shortly after I joined Google Cloud acquired DORA. And so it's from within Google Cloud that this research has continued. The research itself is program and platform agnostic. So it's not research about Google Cloud. It's research about those technology teams. And it focuses on, right, we look at things like process success in your organization and culture within your organization. In fact, over the decade, we found that culture is one of the strongest predictors of what your overall performance is going to look like.
Absolutely. I mean, I can't agree with you more about culture, right? It's when you go into an organization, and for myself, having gone to telco and banking and retail and manufacturing, and now the last 6 years in defense, I can see across the board when you come into an organization where the culture is incredible, it just eats everything else for breakfast, right? You can't compete when you have a great team and everybody's gelling, and it's amazing. It's also interesting how you and we've kind of crossed paths over the years. I had my book club, and you joined some lunch and learns over the years with the support in the military, and then hosting and helping host the Jenkins user conferences and the Jenkins meetups. You were over at Chef doing the Chef meetups, and so it's been quite a journey. For me, it's been about 15 years, and I'm just very fortunate for the friendship and collaboration with you over the years. So thanks for
absolutely.
that,
and I think that idea of community is so important to all of the work that we do. The reality is that none of us can improve alone, and that includes even within a team. Of course, we can improve as a team, but we can learn so much more by connecting with other teams, whether those other teams are within the same organization or even outside of the same organization. And this is a thing that's really important to DORA as well. In addition to the research that we do every year, we also help sort of foster a community around DORA. I'll mention that website, but I feel like I first have to mention the main website. DORA.dev is where you can go to find all of the information that we've published over the years and stay up to date with what's coming new. And then DORA.community is where our community gathers. And in that community, we've got thousands of practitioners, leaders, and researchers from around the world who are all coming together to learn from each other and to share with one another how they take insights from the research and put them into practice. And that, to me, we have regular meetings, virtual meetings with the community. And I'm not shy to say that the hour that I get to spend with the community about once a week, that is the highlight of my week for sure.
That's amazing. Nathen, can you walk us through the journey a little bit more here just for our audience? So Dr. Nicole Forstrand, Jez Humble, for those who don't know, they wrote a book called Accelerate. I think Jez is a professor up at Stanford, I believe. And then Gene Kim, actually, this book behind me, the Phoenix Project, the Unicorn Project, the DevOps Handbook. So they kind of got it going. And then Google took over in 2007, 18.
Yep.
And so every year we have the State of the DevOps report, right, where we open this up for several weeks, right, every year, and we get research. And can you give us an idea of back in 2014 when this really started? What was the engagement like, and what is it like today? Because I think that's a really incredible story to tell of just the growth of DORA and the engagement around the globe.
Yeah, for sure. It is a pretty interesting story. And in fact, if you look at the 2024 DORA report, we have a whole chapter in that report that's dedicated to a decade of DORA. So it goes into a little bit more detail about this history. But at a very high level, the sort of highlights along that journey, this research program really started in the very early days of the DevOps movement. And in fact, it started out of a company called Puppet Labs. Well, the company was called Puppet Labs at the time. It was then later called Puppet and was eventually acquired by Perforce. So Puppet sits within Perforce right now. This research was really, trying to understand there's new movement, DevOps. Does it matter? What are the implications of teams that are adopting these DevOps practices and so forth? So it started at Puppet. Dr. Nicole Forstrand was in academia at the time, but learned of this report and in part, decided to transition out of academia and come into industry and partnered up with the folks at Puppet to help bring a little bit more rigor and science to the way that the research was being run and the analysis that was being done on the data. And so that continued for a while. And actually both Nicole Forstrand and Jez Humble for a while worked at Chef. So we were all co-workers at Chef together. And even during that time, Puppet was the one that was really leading the research. And you might not know this, but Puppet and Chef were actually kind of competitors. They definitely offered solutions in the same space, right? But this also is kind of a testament to the program and platform agnostic nature of the DORA research. And it really is research that is meant for the common good. As the saying goes, a rising tide lifts all ships. As the story goes, eventually, Dr. Nicole Forstrand decided to leave Chef. Jez had already left Chef, but Nicole and Jez got together with Gene Kim, who, as you mentioned, authored the Phoenix Project and is the CEO of, or the leader of IT Revolution Press, who has so many great books that they've published. They came together and they founded a company called DORA. They also published a book called Accelerate, again, published by IT Revolution. And that organization continued to run the research, continued to consult with organizations to help them put the research into practice and so forth. And then eventually was acquired by Google Cloud. Now, since the acquisition, Dr. Nicole Forsgren has gone on to, first she went on to GitHub, and now she's at Microsoft Research, and she continues to do a lot of really interesting, great research in this space around developer productivity and how do we use technology better to further the goals of our business and to serve our customers and constituents. And Jez is actually still at Google, although now he is a full-time SRE. So he's on call. He might be responding to an incident right now, even as we speak. Who knows?
I know I've talked to him a couple of times trying to get him on the show, but he's a tough guy to get on.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So DORA, 10 years, over a decade now. How big is the community today? How many?
Yeah, the community today, registered in our community, we've got thousands of practitioners, leaders, and researchers. And then I think the important thing, though, is that even beyond that sort of metric, it's just the influence that DORA has had across the industry. Now, DORA has always had sort of a center of gravity around software delivery performance, and that center of gravity shows up in our software delivery performance metrics. So these were metrics that were sort of identified, defined, and advocated for by the DORA research program. These are 4 software delivery metrics that look at throughput and stability of change that you're driving with your systems. These software delivery performance metrics essentially have become industry standard. There are probably 100 different vendors that are out there that provide integrations into all of the tools that you're having so that you can visualize and look at dashboards that show those software delivery performance metrics. You can monitor them over time and so forth. And then teams and organizations around the world are using those metrics to really get a sense of how are we doing today? And then hopefully looking at the rest of the research to understand what might we change to improve how we're doing with these software delivery performance metrics.
Yeah. I mean, I think for the audience here, this is really key what Nathan is describing, these 4 metrics and how there's all these vendors out now that can kind of plug into the different various tools. So if you think of your software development process, right, we call it the SDLC, and we think about, okay, what's the concept to code, vision, roadmap, right, design, requirements, development, test, integration, deployment. There's, back when we started in DevOps 15 years ago, there was, 15, 20, 30 different tools that you'd have to use to do that. Now we're kind of seeing a lot of consolidation, but the great thing is everybody's really aligned on this DORA metrics. And those are, Nathan, forgive me, I'll take your platform for a second. So we have deployment frequency, right, which is how often an organization successfully releases to production, right? So that's an important metric, especially for our military customers, because we want to get feedback a lot quicker, right? We want to deploy and not have these big releases, but redeploy often, right? Every day, every week, every hour, ultimately. So we also have the second one, which is lead time for changes. So this is the amount of time it takes a commit to get into production, right? So that's that cycle time there. Number 3 are a couple of quality metrics, like Nathan said. So change failure rate. This is the percentage of deployments that are causing a failure in production. And then lastly, time to restore services. So if we have a production service or instance and it crashes, how long does it take an organization to recover from a failure in production, right? So a system using that. And then there's reliability metrics, which is kind of the underwritten 5th one. But those are the 4. And what's really cool is as a technologist, you can really use these to drive change. It really surfaces the total cycle times, these metrics, to then say, hey, now where do we put our investments? Do we invest in our development process? Do we invest in our requirements? Should we automate Jira? Should we automate continuous integration here? So it's been super helpful in some of my programs in the military and industry.
Also super important to realize that those 4 metrics, you can use them basically to measure the delivery performance of any technology that you're working on. Maybe it's technology that you're burning to a CD or a DVD and putting on a helicopter and flying out to a ship. You can use those 4 metrics. Maybe it's, a simple website that you're working on as kind of a side project. You can still use those 4 metrics to help identify how's your software delivery performance going today. Of course, you don't really want to compare those two. Constraints and the environment and the context of both of those 2 applications that are kind of at ends of the the extreme, they're not going to have the same software delivery performance. And that's not the goal. The goal is that you're improving over time, right? That mindset and practice of continuous improvement. And I really look at those 4 metrics as sort of indicators for how we're doing. And the raw numbers matter less than how are they changing over time? Are those numbers improving? And it is really important to consider all 4 of them together, because if you only look at those throughput metrics, you might be moving faster. But if you ignore those stability metrics, yeah, you're moving faster and we're breaking things all the time. That's not good. So we want to be looking at all of them together so that we can make sure that we have a nice balanced approach and use that to help drive our improvements.
Yeah, 100% agree. You know, the other thing, I'd love to tell a fun story and really give credit to you guys, Nathan and Nicole, and feel free to share this with your internally, because it's really, I think, a great story for our country. And so I had a program, and with the U.S. military, we have the government, but then we also have the prime contractors. So we got, think of like Lockheed, Boeing, all the big primes, and the government. And there's a little bit of a wall in between where the government writes the contract, gives the money, writes some requirements, and then says, okay, go off and build it. So not too agile, right? And so coming in and trying to help the DoD be more agile, we have to really break down those barriers, those silos. And one of them is the actual contract process, right? This is an area where we really have to fundamentally transform the way that we do agile contracting in the DoD. And I just wanted to share a success story here where we had this program. And when you talked about burning the disk, it made me think of it. So we had this program where we literally had to burn disks and then send those disks over to some place and then go across a big ocean and go to another place. And so there was a long cycle time. I'm talking, a year to deploy. They never deployed anything actually for that specific program until we really transformed it. But what happened was we actually got the contract officer to change the contract, which is very rare. When you have a big $500 million program that's on contract, everybody agrees. Nobody wants to change it because it's a lot of work. But we got the contract officer to say, hey, let's go ahead and open up the contract and let's change our award fee and our incentive fee. Because at that time, I couldn't get the prime contractor to change their behavior of developing our software, right? And so we ended up putting the 4 DORA metrics in the new contract under the award incentive fee section to say, hey, well, here's a little carrot. Here's another few $1 million, Mr. Prime Contractor, if you can accelerate your cycle time by 15% in Q1 of 2021. And so we're really specific. Now we started to have our goals, our OKRs, of quarterly objectives and key results, and we tied those to the DORA metrics to improve our both quality and productivity. So, and it's a very critical program for our country. And so it was really a testament to your guys' work at DORA that we were able to do that. And then afterwards, I got feedback from 40-year legacy DoD professionals that said that it would have taken years to do the changes and get that system implemented without those DORA metrics.
That's really cool. And I think that story kind of highlights one of the things that we talked about earlier, culture and incentives are all tied up together, right? And like as an employee, I'm going to do what I'm incentivized to do. And if that means move slower, then that's what I'm going to do. If it means move faster, that's what I'll do. I'm going to align to those incentives. I think another thing that's really key there is that the metrics themselves is like the stick or even the carrot. Like here's the reward that we're going after. It's the improvement work that really matters. It's driving that change and using that as an incentive to help drive the change.
Yeah, Gene Kim that wrote their Phoenix Project, his quote is continuous improvement work is more important than daily work.
And continuous improvement by its very nature is never done.
Yeah, absolutely.
For better or worse, we're never done with continuously improving.
Yeah. So Nathan, 10 years, decade in the DevOps DORA metrics. We'll just say DORA, not DevOps anymore, because that's the new brand. We have AI today, right? AI is taking over the world, specifically in 2025. I remember, I think it was 2017, I put on an AI conference up in Seattle, and they talked about the future of AI. It's going to come and change the world, and it's really here now. It's mainstream. You had on another show where you talked a little bit about AI and how it's boosting performance individually, but maybe holistically from a productivity and quality perspective, the throughput is not what we expected. I'm curious to kind of hear your thoughts on this AI paradox.
Yeah, for sure. It's really interesting. And first, because DORA has been around for a decade or so, or more, we're really excited to be at the beginning of another big technology movement. DORA was there when cloud and and DevOps were really taking off, and we got to see the impacts of that over time. And now we're in the same place with AI. We looked at AI 2 years ago in 2023. We looked at AI even more in 2024. And of course, we'll be looking at AI even deeper this year in 2025. And speaking of how we look at things, we run a survey every year. And so we would really love to get input from all of your listeners. If you head over to dora.dev/survey before July 18th, you'll be able to share your own experiences and how things are going. Now, it's really important that you do this so that we have more data and more insights. And we want that diversity of insights from around the world, from every type of organization. But I think it's also really important for you to do this because taking this survey, one of the pieces of feedback we hear from people all the time is that taking the survey is a great moment to pause and reflect on how we're doing. And just by carefully considering the questions, you and your team might immediately come up with ideas around what do you want to try next? What changes do you want to make? And like I said, this year we're looking a lot into AI. So I can't tell you what we're going to find, but I can tell you what we found recently. And in fact, back in March, we published a new report, the impact of generative AI in software development. So some of the things that we know, well, actually, one thing I can tell you already about 2025, of course, we have a survey question that's basically, are you using AI in your daily work? And Heath, between you and me, looking at the early returns from this survey, we may as well have asked, are you using a computer in your daily work? Because basically everyone says yes, using AI to some, are you using electricity? You're really using AI then. So it is pretty widespread. A thing that we found in 2024 that was also very interesting is that it is widespread at the practitioner level, right? Everyone is using it. Everyone that's building, delivering, operating, we're using AI, but it's also being prioritized at the organizational level. And so this means that, you have your generals, your chiefs of staff, your boardrooms saying, what is our AI strategy and how are we going to lean into that? And I think it's that top-down and practitioner or grassroots movement, both coming together, that really are a testament to the impact, potential impact, and the staying power of AI. So I think it's here to stay.
Yeah, I think also, talking about AI a little bit more, when a lot of folks new to technology or ChatGPT came out, 2 years ago now, everybody's starting to learn about, ChatGPT, but there's more to AI than ChatGPT. That's just a large language model. Maybe just pull the thread back and kind of help educate our listeners on, what is AI outside of ChatGPT? Yeah,
it is really interesting because unfortunately, AI has just become we may as well say technology. It is such a broad thing. And like you said, you have large language models that are trained on a lot of data, a huge corpus of data. And a ChatGPT is essentially an interface into that large language model, which has predictive text. You can ask it a question and it's going to go and try to figure out the answer based on the data that it has in that model. We can use these AI tools for so many other things. Of course, at Google, we've been using machine learning and artificial intelligence for a variety of use cases across the board for many, many years. One that I particularly like is, Google, we offer a cloud solution to people, but that means we run data centers, right? And so data centers are a place that can really benefit from fine-tuning the efficiency that you can get in a data center. And we use machine learning and artificial intelligence all the time to do exactly that. Adjusting air conditioning, adjusting water flow, adjusting energy consumption, all of this within the data centers to really make our data centers as smart, as energy efficient as possible. I think that's really, really important. Now, when it comes to using AI for, the software development lifecycle, as an industry, we've had a very heavy focus on using generative AI. And this is, maybe you can contrast this with predictive AI, and maybe just the names help, but predictive AI is like AI that's around concept of making predictions of what will happen in the future. Whereas generative AI is more about how do we generate something. In the case of software development, that something very often is code. How do we use artificial intelligence to write code for us? And this is what we looked at pretty deeply in the last year or so. And what we're seeing is that, as you mentioned, there are really strong individual impacts on that. As an individual software developer, using more AI is predictive of having higher job satisfaction, more time doing concentrated work or spent in flow, if you will. And if we expand out a little bit further than just the individual, but look at some of the team concepts, we're seeing things like as you increase your AI adoption, your documentation quality tends to improve, your code quality improves, your technical debt goes down, code complexity goes down. All of these are really, really good things. But then we take a look at software delivery performance, and that's those throughput and stability metrics that you talked about earlier, those 4 key measures. And what we see is that throughput, that change lead time and deployment frequency goes down a little bit. And the stability, that was your change fail rate and your time to restore, those also drop off. They go down.
Yeah. I'm curious on, are we seeing the research on the why of what's causing that to go down?
Yeah. So unfortunately, our data from 2024 can't tell us exactly why. I would guess that there's a myriad of reasons, but we definitely have some hypotheses. One of them, you actually kind of brought it up in a roundabout way earlier, and that is the challenge with slow deployments and long times between deployments is you're just not getting feedback. And so I wonder if we haven't invested enough in building good feedback mechanisms into our software development lifecycle, whether that's better testing or other types of feedback that we might have. And when you think about it, if we're using AI primarily to generate code, well, we're thinking about a system here where you have to generate code, and there's a bunch of stuff that happens before you do, and then it has to go through a bunch of steps before you deliver it. Well, in that system, there are definitely bottlenecks. Getting feedback on, is this code change the right change to make? Is it working the way that I expect? Is it meeting the requirements? Is it good for the users? There are lots of questions and things that we have to validate in between that process. It's why it's so critical and important that we get it right. If we look at any process that we look at, whether it's writing code or going grocery shopping or building an automobile or a rocket ship, every process, at least one bottleneck. There's some constraint in that process that controls how much of that process can you complete. And usually with software development, the constraint is not our ability to write code or the speed with which we write code. It's things that happen further downstream than that. So what we suspect might be happening is that AI has come along and is helping people write more code and write more code faster. And the result of that is we're trying to take more code and push it through this system. And if we don't have good mechanisms for evaluating that code, for getting feedback, for building trust, etc., then we're not actually addressing the bottleneck in that system. And so things will slow down, things will get worse. And so this is a real challenge for us, but I think it also points to an opportunity. If you're a leader or if you're on a team, it is really exciting. Don't get me wrong. I love using AI to generate code, to prototype things, to build new things that I might not have built before. But it's also really important that we look at other places across our process. Where are our constraints? And maybe we could leverage AI to help with automation in those places, getting faster feedback, getting higher quality feedback.
Yeah, I mean, I think kind of my brain's kind of thinking about, Eli Goldratt and his work back in the 70s on theory of constraints and constraint management, right? I'm going to have to maybe Google to look that up, but I remember it was, you elevate your constraint, you subordinate your other constraints, and then you address that, you break it apart. And I think if you start thinking about, like value stream mapping, where you look at the whole entire system from your SDLC process and start to look at those constraints and have a good, robust continuous improvement constraint management process so that you're not locally optimizing for one aspect of the system.
That's exactly what we recommend with DORA, right? You use those 4 metrics. I kind of talk about those 4 metrics as your scale, right? I get on the scale in the morning, I look down and I see there's a number. And I might be happy with that number, I might not be. But if I want to change that number, I don't change it by getting on the scale tomorrow. I have to change it by the habits that I have, whether that's eating or going to the gym or whatever that is. I have to change something in order to impact those metrics. And so when you get on the scale and look at those 4 software delivery metrics, a really great next step is to say, all right, we want to improve those. Let's do a value stream map where we identify where are all of the handoffs, what are the constraints, and let's look globally at the system so that we can make an improvement that's going to help the entire system and not fall into the trap, like you mentioned, of a local optimization, where a local optimization may very well make the system perform worse.
Yeah, I think I'm just going to dive into the military for a little bit for our listeners. But, if you guys that are listening, remember John Boyd and his OODA loop, right? Orient, Observe, Decide, and Act. They wrote a book about him after he passed away. He's buried at Arlington, really considered to change the art of war on what he did by transforming the fighter aircraft, right? He is the godfather of the F-15, F-16. And back in those days, they had to change the way that they built those aircraft. They were still bomber pilots from World War II that were at the Pentagon. But it goes back to system thinking. And he, at that time, wrote the aerial attack study that realized that the Russians could have air superiority in the next few years if we did not change the way that we were thinking about building our fighter jets, right? And so, Pratt and Whitney was making the engines and Boeing or Lockheed's making the fuselage, and they're not talking to each other. I think we have that same paradigm today with the People's Republic of China, where they are our peer competitor. and we have to, get inside their OODA loop, right? And make sure that we're building technology at the pace of relevance, right? That we can, compete on this global stage. And it's going to require a new thought leadership, right? Of system thinking and thinking about value stream mapping and DORA metrics and these types of things to help us, move a lot faster. I think one other story I wanted to tell you, Nathan, is that, it's just great to talk to you and tell you, we'll catch you up since I talked to you last year. Another one where I had another prime contractor and they were resistant to change, but, visualizing the work as well, right? So we talk about bottlenecks. What I did was I brought in everybody in the system. So all the product owners, the scrum masters, the product managers, the architects, engineers, had about, 10, 15 folks, and we had everybody that was knowledgeable about that system. And we value stream mapped it out, but we did it in the office of the vice president, who owned that program. He was the leader, and we mapped out the whole process, and we found that it took, 11 months to deliver one user story through the system. We identified all the bottlenecks, right? We looked at all the time, how many defects and all our DORA metrics, mean time to failure. But then what we were able to do is when that VP came back from his vacation and saw this, I was able to walk him through that in a very visual way and had input from his own people, right? So that's just a great technique for those out there working on some of our government military programs to visualize your work, look at those bottlenecks.
And I think the other key to that is that you mentioned is you brought together a cross-functional team to build out that map. And while the map itself does have a good bit of value and you can use the map to walk someone through it, the best value that you get from that exercise, and I'll borrow a phrase that I learned from my friend Steve Pereira, is the mapping that matters, not the map. It's the act of building out the map that really, with that cross-functional team, you start to expose assumptions that are made about how the system works that aren't true. And that, again, helps uncover a lot of friction. It might even uncover some duplicative work that we don't need to worry about automating that. We can just eliminate it because I did it and then you did it. It's the same thing. Let's have an audit process in place and we can eliminate one of those two steps.
Absolutely. Yeah, I did a PI planning event one time. I probably had 120 people in a huge auditorium and we mapped out the whole process, like 5,000 sticky notes on the wall. It was a lot of fun.
Going back to like the theory of constraints and one of the things that we've learned over the decade is, look, if you want to improve your software delivery performance, one of the best ways to do so is to ship smaller changes, right? If you have smaller changes and less work in process, that's kind of the path to better software delivery performance.
Yeah, we in Agile, we call it the invest model: dependent, negotiable, valuable, estimatable, and small, right? You got to make things small and testable. So let's switch gears a little bit, Nathan. Talk a little bit about your work in SRE, right? So you've been championing site reliability engineering best practices within Google Cloud. Where do you see the big kind of cultural clashes and wins with legacy? Because a lot of the stuff in the DoD is big legacy systems, big enterprise type stuff. So how do you blend that SRE discipline with this kind of DevOps agility, that we're trying to implement with DORA?
Yeah, for sure. So I am lucky to work at Google where SRE was born as a practice, and I get to talk with SREs all the time and work with customers and others in the industry that are trying to put some SRE practices into place. And I think some of the biggest insights that really come out of this, first, when it comes to DevOps and SRE or software delivery and SRE coming together, the reality is that you can't improve what you cannot change, right? And so if you think about that from a software perspective, let's say you're running a system and you're not happy with its reliability. You want to improve its reliability. Well, the only way you can do that is if you change something about that system. And oftentimes when we're talking about technology systems, the way that you change something is you ship code. And so that really ties this idea of I want to improve reliability right back to I want to improve software delivery performance. So if I can ship software, if I can ship changes to this application faster and safer, then I have a better to improve its reliability. I think another thing that's really important lesson from SRE, they have a saying within the SRE community that the reliability of your application is its number one feature. It's the top most important feature. And I've heard it said that, your customers, the users of that application, they depend on what that application does today. They might wish for what you're going to ship them tomorrow, but they depend on what it's doing today. And so your application's ability to meet its promises to the user is of the utmost importance, right? And that reliability, it gets measured a bunch of different ways, right? It's not just, is this application available, but how fast is it? Is it giving me accurate information? Is it correct? Is it giving me fresh data? All of these are different components of how we think about reliability. And then the other thing that I think is so super important is that the way that SRE really works is our goal as a site reliability engineer is to create just enough reliability to keep a typical user of this application coming back for more. And it's not 100% reliability. That's not our goal, because we know that it's a terrible goal because nothing works 100% of the time. That's an impossible goal for us to meet. So we have to work together as SREs with product owners, with users, with software development teams to understand what is the appropriate level of reliability. And then, depending on what that answer is, how do we change this system so that it can meet or exceed, but not too much, that level of reliability? And so having those deep conversations really starts to connect everyone together. And most importantly, it connects everyone across these cross-functional teams to the user of the application. The thing that really matters, like the reason we're building this application. We don't build applications because new technology has come along and I want to play with that. Okay, maybe we do build applications for that reason sometimes, but like the successful applications we're building for a user, we understand that user, what they're trying to get out of this application. We're making promises to them by shipping them this application, and our ability to keep those promises is paramount.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I see it all the time in the DoD where the users really don't have a lot of extra bandwidth or time to engage with the technology teams, the program office, right? And so we have to find that right balance, right? Whether they come to a planning event or we do a demo or we help write requirements or we do a design session, but it's so important to ensure that we, bring those users into the fold. So what I'm hearing here is a lot about collaboration, right? So bringing everybody together, making work small, right? Little's law, right? Just invest model, getting things out the door, ship quickly, write requirements small, design small, right? Get things moving through. And then the other one that I'd love to peel the thread back is on leadership, right? So when we think about change, I think fundamentally what I see is really having the leadership on board with the change, right? We have, Cotter's 8 steps on leading change, and, it's about setting that vision. But, I hear a lot from leaders sometimes where they talk about agile, is dead, or DevOps is, over, right? AI is here now. But, from as you're seeing kind of these labels evolve, how do you coach leaders who are kind of still stuck in that DevOps is dead or agile is dead argument that need to focus more on outcomes? Like maybe AI can help kind of, move in that direction.
Yeah. And I think you've hit the nail on the head there with focusing on outcomes. I think that a leader's job is really to sort of set the mission, set the North Star for us, and then stand back and let the team who understands the context and how to get that mission accomplished, let the team autonomously decide what they're going to do, right? And that I think is really important. So a leader's job is really to set that mission, set the goal, drive alignment across all of those teams to make sure that we're all working towards the same goal, and then provide the time and space for the teams that are working within that organization to connect with one another, to collaborate with one another, and really as a leader, celebrate those connections and collaboration that is happening. So I think that's really, really important.
Yeah, I think, I don't know if your shirt there are those avocado top 5 bang. At the end of every sprint, we wanted to come up with this award that we would give our team members, right? An award. And we gave an award to a team. We had about 4 teams. And then each team though you had your kind of core team, right? Which is your scrum team, right? So you had a product owner and 3 or 4 developers, tester, architect. But then you had these other folks that were kind of outside the core team, right? That were, business analysts, right? Folks that were out researching with users, project manager type folks. Like there was we had maybe, 9 people on the core team and then maybe another 10 or so outside the team that would come to an event. They'd come to stand-ups, they'd come to demos, right? But they were still part of the team, just kind of on the peripheral. And so we came up with the Avocado Award because your avocados, you got the core, right? And then you got the outside, but we're all part of the avocado, right? And so I think that's really, it's about celebrating success. At those sprint demos, that should be an opportunity to celebrate wins. We'd pass out the Avocado Award. We had avocado sock, avocado cups, everything avocado, and we had an award, and every team was doing the same thing. So switching gears, we got a few minutes left here, Nathan. So you authored an article called "The 97 Things Every Cloud Engineer Should Know." And so, just curious, now we're in 2025, what what are the things that are kind of still getting overlooked when you originally wrote that article? And why does it matter with this kind of, in our world, like in the military, with mission critical systems?
Yeah. So that article was actually a book that we published together with O'Reilly, and I was a co-editor and a co-contributor to that book. And that book actually came out in, I want to say it was 2020. So a really interesting time. And of course, a lot of the things that matter about the cloud that are important, I think, are covered in that book. It is a series of kind of short essays or articles, well, 97 of them, if you count, of course, about thinking about how to use the cloud. And the really nice thing about that book, I find, is that it really spans the gamut from some deep technical things that you have to take into consideration all the way through to some of the cultural and collaboration things that we've talked about. But a good example there is like, there's a chapter written by Wilson Winslow that's all about how as an engineer that's using the cloud, you might have to start thinking like an accountant and someone in finance. You know, when you're using the cloud, you suddenly have a lot more access to and visibility into how does spend work and how are you being charged for the resources that you're using on the cloud. And that's very different than maybe the days of the data center where you made a big upfront investment and now using that particular server or what have you, there was really not much additional cost on top of that. Of course, aside from like electricity and networking, which you still have, some considerations for in the cloud as well. But really thinking about, hey, I need to be able to communicate with my finance team to help them understand. And you go back to agile contracting. What about agile finance? An old school finance person loves to set a budget at the beginning of the year and hit that budget at the end of the year. When we're responding all the time to change and sort of being nimble and agile with what we're doing, spend is going to change over time. And the cloud both enables that and it gives us the visibility into how we're spending. And so there's, a deep article on that. There's an article about the differences between reliability and resilience and robustness. I think it's called the 3 or maybe the 4 R's of reliability. And it talks about the actual definitions of these words and how we tend to use them interchangeably, but they are not, if you go back to the math, they aren't interchangeable and they're all talking about very different things. So it's things along those lines that J. Paul Reed, by the way, I gotta shout out to all of the contributors.
Yeah, so great book, 97 Things Every Cloud Engineer Should Know, if you guys get a chance to check that out. So Digital Frontlines, we love origin stories. So Nathen, you hosted the Food Fight Show, right? That was way back. I had to kind of go back a few years to find this of, storytelling and tech and, just curious on how that shaped your current advocacy work.
Yeah, for sure. So the Food Fight Show is actually, it was a podcast, not dissimilar to Digital Frontlines, although probably our quality was maybe a little bit, it was early days. In fact, I was just looking it up right before we started this show. Our farewell episode was in June of 2019. So here we are. It's been quite a few years since we've published any of the Food Fight shows. But for me, that show is really critical to sort of in my career because when that show first came out, first the tagline of that show is called The Podcast Where DevOps Chefs Do Battle. And so it was about DevOps and with a very heavy focus on Chef, the company that I used to work for, the Infrastructure as Code company. Well, Food Fight was not started by me. I was at a place, I was responsible for web operations. At this organization, we were moving everything from the data center up to the cloud, and I had a terrible commute. So it was literally an hour and a half one way every day. So I spent, 2 to 6 hours, 2 to 3, 4 hours in the car every day. I listened to a lot of podcasts. And one of the podcasts, as soon as it came out that I found was Food Fight Show, which was all about Chef. And I'm like, oh, I'm a Chef user. I'm hosting meetups about Chef. I've got to listen to this podcast. Well, I started listening to it and I thought, I bet I could contribute to this podcast. And so I reached out to the host of the podcast and said, hey, in the world of Chef, we publish these cookbooks. What if I gave you a news brief that was like, hey, since the last episode, here are the new cookbooks that have been published to the community website so that everybody can get some recognition and find potentially new recipes and cookbooks that they could use.
That's a great idea.
Yeah. And so I did that for a couple of episodes and then they invited me on to the show to be a co-host, a regular co-host. I ended up leaving that company to go work for Chef because I was so in love with the community and the technology and all the impacts that it was having. Once I moved to Chef, I kind of took over the Food Fight Show full time as the primary host and kept that going for a number of years. But yeah, that was a really fun podcast. One of my favorite episodes, though, I'll tell this story very, very quickly. We talked about incident management and time to recover and all of this. In one episode, we had John Allspaw on. John Allspaw you might know his name, but he's very much focused in the resilience engineering space and does a lot of deep work and deep thinking there. And part of that work at the time, he was really trying to help us as an industry get better at doing postmortems, right? Incident reviews and what can we learn after an incident? So we had him on an episode.
Yeah, we call them after action reviews in the military.
Exactly, right? So many different names. Well, we had him on an episode to talk about like his process, and he was working at Etsy at the time. So what were they doing? And just get a lot of insights from him. Well, that episode in editing, it got destroyed. So that episode was never released. So what we did, and this is my favorite part, we had John come back on and facilitate an after action review about the episode about after action reviews that got destroyed. So that is one of my favorite episodes, I think, of the entire. I am indeed.
Does that bleed over into your tech talks and some of your conferences?
It definitely does from time to time, for sure. And of my 3 children, my oldest decided to go to the University of Louisville. He's finished a bachelor's degree and a master's degree there. He's about to start medical school there. So that's meant I've had someone in Louisville, the heart of bourbon country, for 6 years now, and at least another 4 years to come. So I'm super stoked about that. And Louisville, if you've not been, of course.
I played football down in the South Carolina, and I was all through the belt down there in Kentucky and Tennessee, and I miss the South. Great food, great. Nathen, thanks so much for joining us today. It's been a real pleasure. I'm really excited to have you on, and really just thankful, right, to the DORA project and the folks over there at Google Cloud for all your contributions to the community and making my job as a coach easier, right, and really champion this across the board. Without it, I don't think I would have any success in really transforming some of these programs. So you mentioned that the DORA survey is out now. You can go to DORA./survey. That's DORA.dev. And again, remind us of the date until it closes.
Yeah, that'll be open until July 18th. And then look for our report probably sometime in, I like to say, Heath, the month of September. That's usually when we publish the report, the month of September.
Perfect. Yeah. So I'll put the last year's State of DevOps in the link here on our channel. So for the folks listening, you'll have access to that. You'll have access to the DORA survey report that closes here in a couple weeks, and I'll also Nathen's LinkedIn as well. So please follow Nathen Harvey on LinkedIn podcast, and I'll close. Nathen, any last words before we end the call today?
Yeah, Heath, I want to thank you because while this research is fun and important, research that sits on a shelf is kind of meaningless. It's not super important. It doesn't really add any value. It's practitioners like yourself that take this research and put it into practice. That's what brings real value. And so thank you for helping teams along that journey and taking the insights from the research and using them as hypotheses for what you want to do next with your team. I think that's what's really important. So thanks for that.
Thanks, Nathen. I think it's going to be an exciting year with AI, and I'm really curious to see what comes out in your report here in September, October.
Yeah, exactly. September.
All right. Nathen Harvey, Google DORA Project. Thank you, sir.